subject of this class came up a couple of years ago, and we realized that people were drawing, but they didn't know how to make numbers and letters very well in their drawings. And so this course was devised in order to fill in the gaps, and I'm going to tell you all about it in this presentation today. I also put out a flyer here that has a little bit about me and how to get in touch with me, some cards, and also the textbooks for the class, and as well as recommended books. So you might want to take a look at those in a while. So I'm going to start in, and forgive me if I read a lot of this stuff, but I'm going to run through, there's 25 or 30 slides, and they're readable, but I will take off on the things that happen. So the first one, does it help if I read that, or are you happy? Okay, I'm going to go straight on through, and come on in and sit down. Digital expertise for illustrators is something that it's extremely necessary, not only because people who draw like to draw, they like the analog world, and they're a little bit leery of spending a lot of time or getting caught up in the computer. But the drawings don't need to stay in the drawing book, in the journal. And so getting them out of there and in a printable form for the real world or the wide world is a good thing. So we span the development from a seed grid, which is the way I like to start most classes, and then proceed to hand lettering and developing that hand lettering, and then taking the hand lettering into Illustrator to create Bezier points and manipulate it further, getting outlines to which you can apply Illustrator's special effects and all those things that create 3D or other effects. So we have the opportunity now to give the illustrator another look at composition, layout. It's not just an isolated drawing on a page, but it relates to the whole rectangle or circle or whatever it is as a composition always. So that is a pretty good grounding in going further and deeper into your art. The seed grid, which I'm very fond of, allows you to sense the flow throughout your page, and I'll show you how that works. We take the marks we make and proceed far enough so that you could actually create a font, and you probably will create a very simple font in this class, which only needs to then be taken into the software for font creation like Font Lab or Glyph or one of those others. There are more all the time, but there are some main ones that offer demo-free software for you to play around with for a few months. And at the end of this class, you would be able to take what you create in this class into that kind of software and start writing with it, typing with it, playing around with it. So we get pretty far. And if I can find my pointer. The next, I've got one more page or two that give a kind of an overview. As I said, we do go from pencil drawing to Bezier point, and that's a pretty large span of time. We look at the history of drawn letters, typography, logos, so you get drawn letters from the very beginning of time all the way to present. We look at the contemporary usage of letter form. We look at the basic principles of logo design, which is really design, but specifically we treat the way the logo works. Seed grid exercises develop rhythm, Figureground studies, and relationships are also another session page that or actually a whole module on Figureground, dark light composition, and how that creates the whole elastic unity of a line of text. Integration of typography and illustration, yes, I mean, if you draw a perfect little drawing of a kid with a t-shirt and then you don't know how to put the word scram on it, this makes a difference. So this way you can join up your illustration with the lettering and be very confident that you're doing the right thing for your work. We design logos, word marks, and icons. I should not gesture with this thing, it gets away from my face. Draw, modify, and manipulate hand lettering. So if you draw stick letters, which we will, the simple block letters with pencil, we learn to bring those into Illustrator as a monoline and then beef them out. The skeleton is practically invisible. All you see are the points, and then you just start dressing up that letter. We get to know type families, the weight, spacing, kerning, tracking, leading, all the things that you probably already, if you've been lucky enough to take typography first, you know. But if you haven't, it's in here. So you can rest assured you will know those things. Use existing fonts correctly for text and body copy. So we not only create letters and draw them, we get used to hunting around for the best font, knowing how to make it land in the right place, look right, interlinear spacing, the shape of the text block, all those things that happen with a font you'll get to use. We create and modify designs digitally using the Bezier points. We prepare files for print, web, and unique client use. So you will know how to prepare that file perfectly. And of course, I'll be looking over your shoulder one way or the other. And I like that online. I'm there every day. On site, I am obviously there at the computer lab, but also I like to be in touch with my students in case there's a question any old time. Explore markets for illustrative use of type and logos. So toward the end and during it as well, but especially toward the end when you're ready to launch and use what you've learned, we will gather up a list of ways that you can use what you've learned. So that's good. Let's see, next. Oh, I meant to say on the two figures there, the one on top is a seed grid exercise. And that's how you get to know the page, by plotting it out without a ruler, just going by what you think is the correct even spacing. And that way we weed out tendencies for people to go downhill with type or with what they're writing, or make uneven spacing. So the seed grid is very important for self-correcting. You can immediately see when something is off or different. So it makes it quite simple. And not only that, you get to develop all kinds of wonderful strokes without being too precious about it. And the one in the bottom is this could be made just by laying down points, this K, but it's also basically a brush stroke K that has been cleaned up, modified, and tightened up in Illustrator, so modified. But it could be definitely drawn like that, and it's made to look fat in the weight of all the three elements, the stem and the arm and foot. But if you look at the negative space of those things, you've got a very narrow negative space at the bottom, a medium-sized one at the top, and a wide one in the center. And that's what makes it good. There's a little bit of each. Okay. Our next slide, I'm just listing some of the projects that we do. We keep a letter form journal, and you make 5 entries per week. And this is the way you keep track of your thoughts on the way to building your final project. We invent a code alphabet from the seed grid exercises. Negative space, we work with a brush and make positive and negative shapes at the same time. We make a venue sign that could be hung in your doorway, or anywhere, but the venue sign is something you actually make not digitally. We also take one word and learn to vectorize using image trace, which is kind of a broad bucket point editing. You get a lot of points usually, and it's suitable for some things and not suitable for others. We design a poster with hand lettering enhanced in Photoshop. We draw a monoline alphabet and point edit it in Illustrator, and then beef it out, dress up the stems and strokes, and use it in a tightly fitted layout. Everybody can still hear me? Good. Then we design a composite broadside containing a modified lettering over a photograph. We often get asked to put lettering on top of a photograph, and it is sometimes the client is not very cognizant of the difficulty. So you have to use a lot of tricks to make your lettering stand out, and you need to know how to give it your best shot. So we, a photograph, it's missing an O. Sorry about that. So basically, that brings us to the final project, which is open-ended. And I assume that people who learned Photoshop and Illustrator enough to sign up for this course would have a kind of a project in mind that they might want to do. So I give a wide range of possibilities. Be package design, poster, a website page, an iPad landing page, a book cover, anything book arts, skate deck or anything sporty, or wild, streetwise, or other promo piece like a decorated resume, or I don't know, something, a card for, a postcard for publicizing your design studio, whatever. And so this comprehensive project contains a unique logo or word mark that you have made from the ground up and decorated, dressed up with special effects that you've learned. Then you will have a tagline, a text block, or an attribution line, or a copyright line in an existing font, and that'll take care of that requirement. Then you'll have an illustration or a photographic image, a color block or textured, patterned, colored layer, spot graphic or icon, and various optional shapes, borders, rules, custom flourishes, dingbats, what have you. So there's a lot to choose from, but your final project could really end up looking very spare, depending on your use of hierarchy and your sense of restraint. So not everything gets to be the same size. So we start working on the rough drafts for that about Module 10, which allows a good 6 weeks to, while you're working on a few other projects, to build your ideas and to test everything. So should be okay. This has not been taught yet, so when I see what comes back, I'll, maybe get a tenth of what I want every module. I will have to adjust and ask for 80%. Anyway, we will manage. The daily journaling goes for 12 modules, and it's just whatever you see. You could sit in this room and make 5 sketches of anything you see on the wall that's lettered, or sketch the back of somebody's backpack, part of a logo, whatever, but just to feel those letters just coming into you, don't pass them by, because they could be part of what you're doing, and they are part of where you are. So it works out. Obviously, this person, a wonderful artist, and I don't have her name right here, has done letterform and hatching, which is typical thing, but even a journal page can be very attractive. Then, the beloved seed grid. This, you can see a page, and that's how we plot it out. Just take a marker, and every couple of inches, make another mark. And you plant your field. And it's the visual field, and that's what we work with. And once you plot that out and make it your own, you feel like you can jump in there anywhere, and you'll know where you jump in relates to the rest. It's just a way of encompassing that page, and it works. So it's an abstract drawing of the page. And down here, this little spot is a small reproduction of a grid painting by Agnes Martin, who has done some great work with the grid and is always worth looking. He's a great painter. Here, when you work with a seed grid, it's not just dots. We start with lines, then pairs of lines, a double glyph, then we add another one. So what you do is you realize that there's 20 possible combinations of the 4 basic elements. One is half a unit, and a full unit horizontally, and a half a unit and a full unit vertically. So by putting these together, you get used to playing with the sets of items in this field. And we work with those to work with options and to work with the flow of the white space, because how you place them ends up being a half unit of space or a full unit of space, but no 3 units of space are allowed, nothing other than a half and a whole. So you have lines or strokes that are half and a whole, and you have distances between the terminal points are either a half or a whole. So you have to think about where these things are going and whether you're going to use horizontal or vertical. Anyway, it's a bit of gymnastics, but you create a kind of a trampoline on your page where you can begin to see that forces are moving just because of the arrangement of your lines. So I'll just stop right there because it takes a little getting into. However, what happens is that once you make your alphabet out of these strokes, diagonal, maybe a half circle, and a long and a short. So you've made your alphabet out of these elements. Then you take different tools and different speeds of stroke and write with those letters. So you know what A, B, and C is, but no one else does. So this piece of art is my Pangram, which are alphabetic sentence. It contains all 26 letters, and it reads, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog and cat." And I added "and cat" because it didn't make a nice text block. So there it is. But when you speed it up and add your brush stroke, and you're thinking only about the translation, your brush stroke is not precious or premeditated. It just comes because you need to do it and get to the end. So it really promotes flexibility, spontaneity, and it works out to help you invent new forms all the time. And then that would feed back into your journal, which will become gradually more varied and more exploratory. Next, balance in the visual field is the concern of abstract artists and lettering artists alike. This is a written painting. So you can see the rows of letters, and you can also see the sensitivity of the placement of those O's. So there are words there. It's probably a text. You need to talk to the artist about that and see what it says. But there's a lot of conscious creation of negative space shapes, and there's really no sense of background. It's like a networked mat, so there's nothing floating. It's all nailed down. It's a kind of a nice thing. Okay, so on the other side, at the same time, we develop knowledge of typography, all the pieces, so you get to know the difference between an ascender, a bowl, taper, and if you know calligraphy, which you'll also get that kind of language, you will know what corresponds in terms of hand lettering to what is there in typography. This means that being a hands-on person, you can begin to talk to the typographers. So it brings the two disciplines closer together, and you can tell somebody what you want because you know the word for it. So that's what we do. And of course, learning all of the terminology of the categories of type, families, and so forth. On Figureground, as I said before, you build awareness of the plastic space that affects letter form by making both positive and negative space shapes simultaneously with a brush. So you really have to think about how you're torquing your brush. You're pushing it down to get a little more, a wider stroke. You're pulling it up to get a narrow stroke. You're lifting it in a certain way so it leaves a point at the end of the terminal instead of ending in a blunt stroke, or vice versa. So you can get what you want if you're concentrating on creating the white and the black at the same time. And it's not, you know, it's like you want to stay in bed and stay warm, but no, you have to make make those two things at the same time, and they're very they're demanding, and it's disappointing when you don't get it. But you know, you keep trying. Negative shape, again. I did this one a while back in a workshop, but it says ubiquitous. It's you balance figure and ground areas for a successful dark-light reversal. And this means that you can see the light as an entity, but if you blink and look at the black areas, you can see that they hang together, and the other ones, the teal, also hangs together. So you have three sets of elements that make one thing, but each of them also makes a separate thing. So they all contribute and they all have integrity, but it takes a little figuring to make sure that your teal is not being repeated too often before you get to the black, something like that. It makes sense when you sit down and try to mess with it. We look at everything. We look, I send everyone to omniglot.com so you can see on that site every alphabet in the world, the entire globe. So, but they don't always have everything. There's a lot of street language that in calligraphy, I mean in graffiti, that, and it is calligraphy, but you need to go around and capture it with a camera because these just happen where they are. And yet you could use those as extra stimulation. You could learn it. You could go out and tag, but you don't want to get caught. This is why it looks so rushed. However, you can interpret it, and I did an M, and there's a lot of things that you can learn about graffiti that are very similar about in respect to other alphabets or scripts, like Carolingian, for instance. You've got the letter, but then you've got accents, and you've got circles, little crowns, stars, and whatnot. But those elements are added to the letters in order to give them impact. So it's like a grouping of things that can be used that belong to each other and have meaning. They're signs and symbols that contribute meaning. So that's why we look at all those different things, because they feed your collecting. We have a work rhythm, and I'll say it goes from we do journals, we rough drafts, we test a lot of tools, we work on perimeter shapes, then scan something, bring it into Illustrator, optimize the edges, mind the gaps, then refine and print, critique, self-critique, then trace over that again. Put it on the light table and fix it again. Make it better. Redraw, refine, and just repeat until you're satisfied. But it goes into the computer, it comes back out, you rework it in and out until you get what you want. And this is just another idea of what might be on your journal page. And again, tracing papers and rough drafts, hatching, that sort of thing. Hand lettering we do from a traced font or a sketch. So this particular drawing is taken from a quick drawing, but once it was in Illustrator, it needed something. So this is a tracing on top of a previous drawing where the artist decided to split the terminals, and then these little dots, I don't know if you can see the dots, those indicate where the extrema points are, where you're going to put your Bezier point for best placement and best control over the curve. Jessica Hish has a very good description of each little thing you need to do in her book, In Progress, and that is a helpful thing. Sign painter styles. We look to the 20s and 30s, and way back, but basically sign painters developed the shadow letter, box letter, chisel letter, all those things. We will learn how to make those in Illustrator. And I've made templates so that you can take a letter and work on it yourself. So I've introduced a few time savers. May sound like a lot, but we can telescope some of it. So you get, your chisel, emboss, inline variations, bracketed drop shadows, open drop shade, where the letter splits away from the shadow, bifurcated serif, where you split the serif off, add points, and change the shape, ornamented, where you introduce designs into the stems and to then cut out and split. And so there's just a whole bunch of things, and even learning one will get you through quite a few impressive client jobs. You don't have to learn them all at once and use them all at once. You will use these things because they're constantly impressive, because they attract attention, and attention is your real estate, the viewer's attention. So we study a lot of, there must be thousands of examples, but we study monograms, retro designs, all kinds of stuff, combining image and lettering. And I think I mentioned this before, problems are presented when text and image need to overlap. And so to avoid getting something lost, you can add a drop shadow, a glow, and accentuate. You can mute the background behind what you're doing, so forth. So we look at all those ways to improve something. And we do have a kitchen sink exercise where we pile everything in. And a lot of, it's very trendy now to see things packed with verbiage and pictures. So It's horror vacui, Latin. My Latin is kind of rusty, but it means filling up every square inch and being petrified of void. So you want to take advantage of the advertising real estate, which you pay for in spades. You neglect no areas with the potential of communicating and pulling the viewer in closely, capturing attention, and that's the real estate. Chalkboard is trending as well, and I get 2 or 3 requests per week for chalkboard. Please come, do our chalkboard. It's either for a wedding or a menu or a restaurant or a cafe, coffee place, and you know, if you want a job, there is one there. And you can improve your skills with whatever you like as you're doing it. So it's a good kind of learning experience. Some people enjoy it to the point that they want to do nothing else. And I've even seen a giant chalkboard at a Silicon Valley annual falderall. So this thing was like 16 feet tall and 8 feet wide, and it was all done in chalk, and very professionally, obviously. But it was that look. So this particular illustration's for Keen footwear, and it just illustrates the idea of blending your illustration with letters. The leaves actually wrap around, and then you have the choice of that kind of feeling, natural sustainability or environmental type of things lend themselves to hand-drawn letter form. Point editing simplifies the letters, and so you can see this is a very well integrated letter. There doesn't seem to be anything in there that doesn't belong. So not a wobble in sight. And so there's a picture of the Bezier point. Here's a blue circle and those handles that you work with. And you can use your own ideas. This one, Rebus for IBM, was very clever. And you can always reinterpret and suggest to your client rather than going lockstep. So surprise people. They ask for 3 things, give them 4. Michael, Dora, we do, in almost every module, we address one person who is, or a business, like P22 Type Foundry, who have contributed so much to graphic design and letter form. So we look deeply into these people, and that way it points you out to the web where you can explore and learn about these people, if what you don't know already. So lots of, you can pick up lots of techniques just by looking at each one and trying to see if you could recreate it. So examine, and a lot of designs that you see were done 15 years ago or 10 years ago, and the capability of the software now has grown so much that you can probably do it quicker, easier, better, I don't know, but it's possible. because I've seen things change. We often get asked to remodel a logo for a business. Sometimes it's for a single person business, sometimes for a huge corporation or business. So you need to understand what you want to keep and what you want to change. And it takes, of course, Louise Feely, very amazing and accomplished designer. Also the wife of Stephen Heller, who has put together so much as well. But they make a good team, each one on their own. Dufour Pastry Kitchens is what this is, and so they've got something like a pastry or loaf shape which they've retained, but in order to contrast with that, instead of repeating your oval, you've got a crisp rectangular sleeve, which is introducing contrast, and that contrast is more eye-grabbing than just the same cartouche turned on its side. You've got the box. And it's a wonderful typeface with a shadow, an inline, another drop shadow, and the three stiff wheats are brought out, and they're expanding, looking lively, and creating a little bit of sense of 3D coming over and wrapping around that band. So we look into a lot of great designers who have reconfigured logos. Paula Scher, poster design. This is hers, and we take the same elements, not those same elements, but we take a colored background and photograph and type and put them all together. So we study different ways of doing that and come up with our own thing. In this one, he's done a very good thing for a series of posters in the UK, north, south, east, and west, and they were drawing interest to different neighborhoods in London, I believe. And so inside the letter, he has put all sorts of writing which point to the different neighborhoods and areas in that locale. So there's lots to learn from that. Great idea of contrast, and also the shadow of the N really is eye-grabbing because you wonder exactly where that light is. This ampersand was done entirely in Illustrator, and it's a series of repeated and morphed lines, creating a kind of a Mobius strip, solid 3D thing. It's fabulous, and this artist has done many things like that. Some with no negative space, they just pull in. We do study font design, and this one is interesting. The red one was designed in 1902 by Alfred Roller, and it inspired Wes Wilson's famous 60s psychedelic letters, and some of those are up there. That's kind of a later version, but up there is by Wes Wilson. And then in 1993, David Nall, or Nally, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, he designed this one, which is very close to these letters. But he made a font out of it so you could go on the web and type with that font. And just knowing these connections is important. We design a lot of things from pre-existing fonts, change them a little bit, enough so that we can copyright it and not plagiarize that. So we have to learn to do enough so that it's our own, okay? But anyway, sometimes just the structure is all you need, then you can go from there. Then we look at the effect in the retail world, and you begin to work your way closer to maybe having a product or something from what you're doing, but that's usually in the future. And house industries. These people are edgy, streetwise, and love hot rods. The founding partners had a certain LA style that was fabulous. Now they are a worldwide industry that is very, well, it's always been respected, but they are a dynamic leader. You could conceivably do something like this in this course. Brush script, a hand-lettered logo, scanned, refined, outlined, and manipulated using Adobe 3D effects. And even on the screen, that light purple drop shadow shows. It doesn't show so much here, but it's definitely there, and it's very subtle. Just a few more slides. This special effects was made with not Illustrator, NewTek Lightwave 3D. And if you want to do something like that, you're going to have to take this class and then go beyond it, because there is software that can do something like this in 10 minutes or something. I mean, short amount of time. You wouldn't have to create the stipple and create the wrap and do all that sort of thing. So software has emerged that really helps to make 3D things happen. I'm going back to Dwiggins again. He called himself Wad. People called him Dwig, but he was a designer, a critic, satirist. He made marionettes out of wood. Everything he did was by hand. And he was the one who coined the term graphic design. And he promoted the integration of all the graphic, typographic, and printing arts. Here are 3 beta symbols. And those 3 he designed so many fonts, all kinds of things. So we learn about him as well. Then we have vector style. Daniel Pallava loves to do these minimally colored, very intricate things that look like a 19th century lithograph. And he creates those in Illustrator. It's absolutely fascinating how he builds his layers out. And that's one of the greatest things about Illustrator, is that you can stack those layers and have them all work together. Michael Dorette also uses Illustrator in the same way, but in this one, this inside out, I love, because there's no strokes, just fills, and the transparencies and the way he works with the image is great. And he also designed Graphic Artists Guild logo. And so we develop the know-how to make a strong original digital image for industry standard reproduction and real-world use. And the worst mistake is to not make any. So you just dive in face first and start making your vectorized art. And that is the run-through. And so it's taken a while to put this together, as you might imagine, but it's still coming together in a certain way because I keep finding things I want to put in there, but we'll see how much the bag can hold. I've put out flyers here and laid out the books that are required for the course and recommended, and there's some cards. So I hope you sign up, and it goes live in the fall. So, yeah. Bye-bye.